Hello and welcome to the 5th edition of the Goa Arts and Literary Festival 2014. I have here with me Kavery Ponnappa, who is an independent writer and author. She has a blog which writes about the regional foods of Kurg, and she's released a book this last year which says The Vanishing Kodavas, which is all about the Kurg region as well.
That's correct.
Right.
Cultural study of the
So let's start with how you started writing.
I began writing when I had just finished my first degree, and I used to freelance for newspapers and magazines, and I wrote extensively on heritage, art, book reviews, exhibition reviews, travel. So it was very broad-based, nothing specialized. And then I went on to get my master's in social anthropology from SOAS in London. And after that, my focus shifted to cultures in particular. But throughout my career, I've continued to be an independent writer, and now I specialize in food and wine writing.
So there's a very, very keen interest in your writing. You basically right now focus a lot on the Kurg region, the Kurg people. And the book, I think it explains a lot on the history as well as the food. History and culture of Kurg, which is, like you said, as old as Goa, about 2,000 years old. So, I mean, would you like to say something more on that?
Kurg or Kodagu is a very special part of the country. It's always had a very unique identity, and it's a very ancient place. And one of the things about the place is how this very ancient culture has managed to survive into the 21st century. Because the people, the Korwas, I think there are more theories about where they came from and how they came to settle in Kurg than about any other people in the world. And it is an anthropological riddle which has not yet been solved. People have not really been able to prove any theory, but they have been there for a very long time. And they have evolved this very beautiful and unique culture, which they've managed to preserve as a living culture, in the sense that it's not, something which only once a year they bring it out in some festival or a cultural festival, but it's a living culture in their villages. It's still linked to farming, to their land. So this is what I wanted to write about when I was a graduate student, because I wanted to give expression to these people from their point of view, because there were many books which were written and studies which were made, which didn't really, it didn't. No, yes, no, well, I don't know about the truth, but it didn't express their history in their own voices from their perspective. So this book is an attempt to have to present the Korwa people from their perspective.
And well, like you said, you've worked for a lot of newspapers, magazines. In fact, the Upper Crust has also listed you in the top 50 fantastic cooks as well. But you talked about the book earlier, and you said it's taken you 15 years to complete it. And you can see with content inside, you've done a lot of research, and I think this is the real true outlook that you'd want to give it. So, I mean, just run me through the 15 years that it took you to write it.
Well, I have to say this part of it is both very, it's something that I felt very passionately about, and also I felt very sorry when it came to an end. Of course, it never really comes to an end. You keep going on. But honestly speaking, when I started, I thought it would take me a maximum of 2 to 3 years. But I began to go into the villages of Kodagu, and I started speaking to people. I didn't know anybody in the villages. I used to just go and introduce myself, and I would take permission from the elders and participate in festivals, village festivals, in ancestor propitiation ceremonies, trances, possessions. This is all part of the culture there. And harvest festival. Every aspect of Korwa life, I began to participate. And I realized that this was not going to happen easily, because, you see, there are some village festivals which they take place once in 2 years, some take place once in 4 years. So you have to wait for those cycles to return. And I didn't go to one place just once. I went back again and again. Yes, to really understand what was happening. And while I was doing this documentation, I realized that things were changing very fast, and there was a need to even visually document it, which is why you'll find that the book is very photo-rich. If you look at it, we begin like this with, very dramatic photographs, because this itself was disappearing. So to coordinate with the photographer and make him see things, a photographer can come in and click whatever he likes, but it has to be relevant to the culture, for that moment or what I'm writing about. So that took a great deal of coordination. So 15 years of research meant talking to hundreds of people, sorting through that material, sorting through the interviews, and cross-checking your material, cross-referencing it, and then distilling it into a book.
And well, you talked about how it's titled "The Vanishing Kodavas," yes. And you also said that it's like depleting. I think it's a depleting kind. They are depleting in numbers. It's a small land, and so you wanted to preserve it. And in that way, as in a book at least, or documentation of a kind.
Okay, I'll try to answer 2 or 3 things which you've asked there. One is, actually we are not depleting in numbers. We are numerically more than we've ever been in our history. But although our numbers have gone up, our culture is dwindling. Yeah, because there are tremendous pressures which have come in, which are some of them are within our control, some are not within our control. Out of our control is government legislation, which is coming in and it's trying to change our traditional laws for ownership of land, the different land tenure systems which have existed in Kodagu for a very long time. Within our own community, we have to be able to find a way to rebuild a lot of the links that we had as a community within ourselves. So it's a bit of both. The pressures are external as well as internal. So in terms of numbers, we're not diminishing, but in terms of culture and the entire Kodwa identity, when you look at it, is rooted in the land. It is linked to the land. Without that land, we have no identity. Our identity comes from the land. It comes from the festivals that we practice. It comes from the language that we speak. And it comes from a very rich oral tradition. The Kodwas were unlettered people until the British came. In 1834, they annexed Kodagu. And that was when our elders went and they asked for education. They put together money themselves and they asked for schools to be created in Kodagu so that boys and girls could both have the advantage of education. So until then, everything, our history, our culture, even for instance, I'll give you an instance. We have songs for everything, for marriage, birth, death, whatever it might be, the histories of the clans, everything is sung. At a Kodwa wedding, when they sing the marriage song, they're actually describing every single thing that's happening around them, including the customs. So everybody who listens, they know the culture. You're learning the culture from listening, from watching. There is no book which will tell you this is what you must do. So when this oral tradition breaks down, you can imagine what happens. It is no longer being passed down to the next generation. Yes, to transmit it. So when I say vanishing, I mean in that sense. We are not able to sustain our culture, which we should and we can. There is no reason why you cannot be modern and have your culture.
So according to you, as in culture and arts, there are many communities in India. What do you think is the importance of these specific communities, every one of them, that brings to these arts and arts and literature festivals. What do you think these cultures should do, as in to preserve themselves, or maybe showcase them more, or educate other people about them?
Okay, I'll speak for the Kodwas, but I have to say that from what I have studied and seen in my travels and through reading, I think small cultures really have a great deal to offer to the world. You see, I wouldn't like to preserve my culture. I would like it to be a living culture. I would like it to be part of my life, part of my children's lives. I don't want it to go into a museum, and I don't want it to go into a cultural center, because that's how it stagnates. The thing about a small culture is that, and particularly some, some of the practices that we have had, because we were small in numbers, we always learned how to live with the people around us. Between ourselves, we are very violent people, the Kodwas. Warriors. We fought wars, very bloody battles with surrounding, the borders of Kodagu. And between ourselves in clans, we were always, there was a lot of infighting. And but there were Muslims, there were Christians, there were, people from so many communities.
Like a small India.
Mini India. And because of the vision of our headmen, we lived in perfect harmony with them. And in fact, even today, there is a place in the heart of Kodagu, a place called Pannangala Tame, where the Kodwas and there was a very ancient group of people called the Kembati Polyas, which in other parts of India they would be known as Dalits. We still jointly worship at that shrine with them. So, this is the balance that they maintained with the people around them, because there was respect for another person's existence, there was respect for for yourself, your culture, but you included everybody, you created little communities, and you stretched yourself to make sure that everything was the best that it could be for everybody. So I think small cultures have a lot to offer, and another very important thing, which is now a world concern or issue. This was an agricultural community, and they created small-scale, diversified farming. And anyone now will tell you that the future of world farming depends on small farming communities. So, yes, urbanization and also crop diversification, because you're not depending on monocultures to bring in your income and your food. And so this is just two examples I've given you, but I would imagine that I think the future of all cultures is linked to small cultures, and learning from them, not trying to go back to how we were 500 years ago. We cannot do that. But learning how they organize themselves, the structures they created, the communities they created, and translating it into a modern life.
So I think on that note, with balancing of communities and not preserving of cultures, but making sure that they stay existence for our future generations as well, I'll say thank you to you, Ms. Kavery. And you were here at the 5th edition of the Goa Arts and Literary Festival 2014. Thank you.